They came in the second wave, the Hydes. However, Zenith and Phoebe were married when they came out. They had gotten married in New Marlboro, and they came out together. From New Marlboro is in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. They came out the fall of 1809, possibly even earlier. They arrived in the fall of 1807. One of the first families in Huron, they purchased lot number 26, which was 8.5 acres, rather small plot for that time, which was located on the southwest corner of Loumisville Road and North Huron Road, right across from the old Hydesville schoolhouse. Is that giving most of you a good picture of where it was? Okay. Hence, Hyde's Corners. Okay. They followed close by. Actually, Zenith's father, John Hyde, came out in 1807, and Zenith came out in 1809. Dr. Hyde, I keep wanting to say Mr. Hyde, but it's Dr. Hyde. Dr. Hyde and Mr. Jekyll, there we go. In 1809, Zenith performed the first surgery in Huron. Daniel Grundy, another leg crush, his leg had been crushed by a fallen tree. Okay, and Hyde amputated that leg with a handsaw, cobbler's knife, and an awl. You're all right, Patty?
What was the anesthesia?
Yeah, right.
Oh my gosh.
So
yeah,
these Hydes, as far as I can see, are no relation to Dr. Henry Hyde that Hydesville is named after. And there's an interesting story that appeared in the Lakeshore News in 1906. Apparently Zenith liked to walk, and he liked to walk north from Hyde's Corners, not very far, was it? Maybe a mile and a half. About a mile and a half from Hyde's Corners up to the lake.
No more than that.
2 miles? Yeah. He liked to walk, and he walked up to the lake, and one day he found something. I'm not going to tell you what he found yet, because that's part of the story. So his family went to, I believe they went to Huron Presbyterian Church. This is later, after the church had started. And church in those days was an all-day affair. You go to church, then you stay for lunch, and then you have Bible study. And so the family went for the whole day. Well, Zenith bowed out. He said he had too much work to do. He wasn't going to go to church today. And his son, his older son, decided he wasn't going to stay for the whole day. He stayed as far as lunch and then said he was going to go home. On his way home from the Presbyterian Church, he noticed some pretty bad-looking smoke up where they had their sugar shack. And he decided he was going to go check it out. And he got up there, and he kind of hid behind the trees because he saw his dad was busy with something. And then he saw that his dad had the cauldron out to boil the sap down, but he was horrified when he saw human bones and skin sticking out of the pot. Stop. So he asked his dad what he was doing, and his dad explained that he had found this body up on the lake, and he didn't want to put it to waste, so he thought he would boil it down and make a skeleton that he could have in his office. So he could explain to people when they had a broken bone or something what was going on. That skeleton was later donated by his grandson to Leavenworth Academy, Wolcott High School. And it was used in the science rooms there for a number of years until Leavenworth Academy was torn down. And I assume it was the first building. There were 2 buildings following that. So Zenith was quite an entrepreneur of scientific fare.
Did they ever find out the body of him?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Obviously he didn't care.
Well, if it wasn't birds or dead, they
That's right.
Well, he boiled it.
He was
boiling it in the cauldron. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah, I heard that.
He was boiling it in the cauldron, boiling everything off. And then they took the bones back to their camp, to their cabin, and stitched everything together.
Where is it now?
Things people used to do
Here's your research task.
We'll leave that to you, Gil. All right.
Picture.
I know. I want to stand close to. Oh, that would be a good. I like that. Yeah. In 1804, William Nixon Loomis was suffering from yellow fever. He lived in Philadelphia, and a friend of his by the name of Charles Williamson said, "Go to Genesee Country. Genesee Country, you'll get healthy, the air is clean, and you'll feel a lot better." So Loomis did, and he wound up in Troopville. Troopville is the former name of Sodas Point. The Loomis family has been a staple of Troopville for years, although the family kind of moved away and died out. They're a very important name in Sodas Point. He fought in the War of 1812, and the battle was in 1813 at the point, and his home was destroyed there. Loomis was pretty wealthy. He was a doctor, Dr. William Nixon Loomis, a doctor of what I don't know. Here we have another doctor. And he purchased land west of Troopville that you may know by the name of Maxwell. Maxwell Creek Bed and Breakfast, Maxwell Creek. His second wife, Sarah Maxwell, her family were Revolutionary War heroes, and he named that area after her family. He also purchased land on this side of the bay. The Loomis tract went from Resort in about a mile and all the way up to the lake. He owned all that, including Leroy, Eagle, and Newark Island, Crescent Beach, and Charles Point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. William is buried in Sodas, and Benjamin, this gal's brother, was buried at Bonnycastle. We're talking about family graves here. He was buried in Bonnycastle with his family. They were later removed to the Rose Cemetery. Another brother of this gal went to New York City, and they're all buried in the New York City area. This is Anna Maria, and Anna Maria was the youngest daughter of William Nixon Loomis. She married Roger Sheldon's grandson, Philo Burt Sheldon, and I think he remarried because Anna Maria died relatively young. She was like 29 or something when she died. And so he remarried. So he's not with her, but she's here. She is the only Loomis in this cemetery. And I am so pleased she's here because what a great story the Loomises have. Her older sister, Elizabeth Fries Loomis Ellett, is the famous poet, authoress. You may be familiar with her. She wrote several poems on Sodas Bay because she loves Sodas Bay. She didn't live here. She moved with her husband to South Carolina. He was a college professor in geology and mineralogy, and he was a pioneer in the daguerreotype photography down there. Well, she was in South Carolina long enough, and about 1848 she decided to move back to where their first home was, New York City. And while she was in New York City, she got involved with Edgar Allan Poe. And she created scandal for Edgar Allan Poe because he was involved with another woman. And she told Edgar Allan Poe's wife about it, and everything just went to you-know-where in a handbasket for Elizabeth. She was quite a troublemaker, but you wouldn't think it when you read her writing. She wrote quite a bit of travelogues, using Sodas Bay as her starting point for many of her travelogues. She also wrote a beautiful 3-volume set about women of the American Revolution. That it's online. You can go to worldcat.org, I believe, and find it and go to an online place to read it. She's a wonderful lady. And so we have Anna Maria, the only Loomis in the Huron Cemetery, and next to her, behind her, as I said, she was married to Philo Sheldon, who was Roger Sheldons, and I think this is Roger. No, this is Norman, so Roger's back here. These are both Sheldon stones. We have Norman Sheldon, who was married to Roxy, and Roger Sheldon. Oh, twist it up here. Roger's back there. We first talked about Roger, so she married Roger's grandson. All right, and then we have the Norman, who was responsible for the Sheldon pair. And our last, well, no, we've got, you want to come over here? We've got two more. Upson. You've heard the Upson name before from Lois. He came from Marion in Hartford County, Connecticut in 1810 and bought forested land here. They were founding members of the Wolcott Presbyterian Church, which became Huron Presbyterian Church. And they were the first elders, and he was one of the first people to become a deacon in the church. His place, if you go back onto Ridge Road and go west, his place is on the south side of the road. I can't think of how to describe it from here. Lois?
Cozad?
Josiah Upson's.
Oh. Josephine Yoder.
Yeah.
Oh, Josephine Yoder is the
That
descendant.
way.
Oh, yeah.
We passed it.
Yeah.
Well,
Used-
let me...
Used to be a tannery and a stagecoach stop and the Huron Church.
Post office.
Post office.
office.
And the Huron Church met there at times in an upstairs bedroom.
Okay. The place is described in a 1917 article in the Lakeshore News. There were 7 fireplaces. The roof boards were 40 feet long, and some of those boards were 3 feet wide.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Josiah went to Utica, especially to pick up handmade nails. Couldn't get them here. He went to Utica to do that. The stone foundation of the house was built without using any mortar, and at the time of the article, which was 1917, that stone foundation was still intact. I assume it's still intact today. There were no lime kilns at the time, so large logs were rolled up. Limestone was placed on top of those logs, and the whole heap was set on fire. And that's how they came up with their limestone to do the plaster on the inside. Sand, lime, and water were mixed together in proper proportions, mind you, turned by a team of oxen. Now, where do you think they put all that gunk? In the basement. In the foundation. And that was used, that's how they made the plaster for their rooms in the house. And across one end of the house was a great ballroom equipped with a spring floor. Spring floor?
Oh, there was a carriage house in Palmyra that had a sprung floor. I guess it was common for
What's that
gathering
mean?
places. They would have a timber that was cut in a bow, and then the floor on top of that, so it would float. And it was sprung.
How cool!
For dancing.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that floor was made of solid cherry and smoothed and polished after it was laid. The first meeting of the town of Port Bay, as Huron was called then until 1834, was held at the Upson Tavern, and Upson was elected Officer of the Poor along with Simeon Bissell. And as we said, the post office, most interesting, I was complaining earlier about Huron not having a post office. This post office lasted from 1828 to 1834. It was the Port Bay Post Office. Then from 1834 to 1905, it was the Huron Post Office, a total of 77 years. I think it's time we get that post office back. So he had 6 children, and Susanna Clark down there, it's said on Ancestry that that's his wife, but we'll leave it alone. And then, not second to last, Columbia County, New York. And he served in the War of 1812, first as an ensign, and in Colonel Van Vleck's regiment. Now that must be really, I'm not a revolution or a Civil War, 1812 war, whatever person. So, but I think there's some significance to Colonel Van Vleck's regiment. I think there was something significant that happened. So that's something I have to research more. Afterward, he became captain in the militia, settled in Wayne County sometime between 1826 and 1836. He served in several positions of public trust as supervisor of the town of Huron from 1836 to 1840, and his sons Reuben and Rufus also served as town supervisors. There was a book in the museum by Cynthia Sowers, Strangers No Longer. Cynthia has moved out to Washington State, and she's been researching the Sowers family for decades. And that book is this thick, and it traces all the different Sowers and their connections. I'd be happy to loan it to anybody if you're interested in reading it. There's some inaccuracies, and some of the pictures are labeled a little strange, but she does it like a novel in telling what the kids were doing at the time and how life was back at this point in time. So it's educational for her grandchildren. And the last one is way down there, and he's one of my favorite people in the cemetery. He doesn't quite fit into the early settlers, but he's an important person just because he was such a renegade. James Madison Cozad came here from Junius in 1856, and prior to coming here, he had gone out to San Francisco to the gold rush. So by what he did when he was here, it's very likely that he came back with some gold. When he came here, he purchased what would be Chimney Bluffs. He purchased all that territory and started a farm there. In 1858, he purchased from Captain Sowers the land at Mudge Creek, the house that June McDougal lives in. Those of you who know June, if you go down into Rice's Mill, it's the only house on the right-hand side of the road. That was a two-story house. McDougal's cut off the second floor in the late 50s and brought it down to one story. They said they didn't like the upstairs. It was too big and gloomy. But that was his house, and it's still standing. I have a picture of his spread in the museum. After he built the house in about 1878, he built what was called Cozad's Liberal Hall. Now, what does that bring to mind for you when you think of Liberal Hall? Good for you. No. Liberal Hall. Any beyond drinking establishment? Okay.
Suffrage movement.
Yes, absolutely. Suffrage movement, abolition. Even though it was 1878, there were still issues with abolition. The slaves were not always freed. They still needed help. So he established Liberal Hall to have as a place where free thinkers, still not drinking, I'm sorry, where free thinkers could gather and talk about social issues. Abolition, women's suffrage. Free thinkers believed that church and state should be separate. Not quite like it is now in Huron, because the church and state work very closely together.
We're good neighbors.
Yeah, we are. We are. But he hosted in 1870, he built the house in 1877, I'm sorry. And in 1878, he hosted the very first Free Thinkers meeting of Western New York State, which was attended by 2,000 people. That's more people than live in Huron right now. They all gathered down there, and there were speakers. Susan B. Anthony was a free thinker. Frederick Douglass was a free thinker. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was a freethinker. So they all gathered here and started the genesis of the freethinkers movement.
What year was that?
1878.
See, 1880 census says there was 2,058 people in Huron. They could have all been there.
That could have been it.
Everybody came.
So we were very fortunate this year. The town received a Pomeroy Foundation grant, and hopefully soon, by October or the beginning of November, we will have a historic marker placed at the site where the Freethinkers meeting was, the first Freethinkers meeting. So yeah, we're excited. We have one marker, and that's in front of the Grange, so now we'll have two. So I want to, are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about General Cemetery with you people that are all genealogy preserving. What do we do to save these stones? I know it's
You can look it up online.
Can you clean them? Can you clean them? Yes.
Eh,
I'm not an expert, but